2013 Springboro Board of Education meeting. Roll call, please.
Coles,
Here.
Tony, Miller,
Here.
Morano,
Here.
Cool.
Here. Okay, will everybody please stand for the pledge of allegiance? Agenda item 1.3 is adoption of the agenda. I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Mr. Regano, I need a second. Second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Morano,
Yes.
Coles,
Yes.
Coles,
Yes.
Miller.
Okay, agenda item 1.4, approval of August 29, 2013 meeting minutes. I need a motion to approve. I will move to approve. I need a second. Mrs. Cole, any discussion? Roll call.
Coles,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Morano.
Abstain.
Agenda item 2.1, Springboro Education Association report. Is there anybody here from the SEA? Move on to 2.2, Springboro Classified Employees Association report. Is there anyone here representing SCEA?
Kathy Ballard, Vice President.
We have 2.3, which is public participation prearranged, and we have no one prearranged. And we have 2.4, public participation. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an agenda item?
Good evening, Stephanie Benjamin, 35 Fry Court. I've been doing some research today on board policies. I would like to share what I found out with the concerned parents and taxpayers who are here tonight. I noticed a non-Springboro resident is on our agenda tonight for a lengthy presentation. I'm trying to figure out how he got on our agenda. 0169 talks about hearing of citizens, where it talks about residents and employees of Springboro Community City School District present at a meeting of the board may address the board in accordance with the board rules. So I'm not sure how a non-resident got on. That would be something that would be interesting to find out. So if a non-resident can get on and talk 30 minutes, can the rest of us request that much time? Springboro residents and taxpayers, can we ask for that much time? Could I possibly invite a more moderate historian to the next meeting for another view? Would that be a possibility? I am a citizen of Springboro and I'm a taxpayer. Do you as a taxpayer consider board meetings public communication? If so, why are we having such one-sided presentations? Would you feel comfortable having your child sit through such a potentially politically charged and maybe one-sided presentation? 0148, public expressions of members. Board members shall not represent their personal opinions as a position of the board in public communications. Do you consider a board meeting public communications? These are questions that maybe you need to think about as concerned citizens and taxpayers and board members. I hope tonight's speaker will offer some worthwhile information since he's been given such a large chunk of valuable time to speak. Valuable time for me, valuable time of you, for you. I'm one of the few liberals in Springboro, and damn it, I'm proud of it. But I do take offense at his tweet today calling somebody a libertard. And I have been known to have a potty mouth, but I'm quoting that. I would never call anybody something like that. Calling people names with different views is no way to get others to respect your own. have been reminded numerous times in here that we need to respect people, respect their views, and listen to them with an open mind. I'm going to listen with an open mind to the presentation, but I'm going to object this time to any hate speech I hear tonight. I am not going to sit down quietly and have another hate speech. We've been down that path before, and I'm not going to sit quietly by this time. The citizens have spoken out against your political agenda numerous times, and it's just not me, the token liberal in here, that feels that way. Many of my friends are very conservative, and they've said that too. Please begin to listen to us.
So, Ms. Benjamin, I don't really know what this gentleman's here to speak about, but I can promise you one thing, I won't sit by for hate speech again either.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, tonight we have a speaker. He is Dr. Larry Schweiger. He's a professor at UD, University of Dayton, has been there for 27 years, and he is a history professor, and he's written several books, 30 total, and done quite a few presentations. And when the subject came up about history and what's being taught and some of the controversy, there was, again, what I recommend is a dialogue. And from that dialogue came numerous recommendations of people we should talk to, experts in the field. And one of those that kept coming up through quite a few emails from across the country and locally was Dr. Schweiger, and that we should look into his book. So I did purchase a couple of the books. My daughter is reading them, and she's really enjoying them. So I thought it would be great if you come talk to us about history, what these kids, a lot of these kids that focus on, and she's going into law, as far as I know right now, going from high school into law, and history is one of those things that tends to be a prerequisite for people going into law, and I would think that a lot of our kids thinking about law would have a good background in history. And I just want to make sure that we get it right, and that's why I was told you would help us present tonight, is an understanding of why it's important to get it right. So I did invite you, and welcome Dr. Schweiger.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I have been a resident of Springboro until about years ago. I did move a couple of years ago.
Excuse me, Mr. Schweiger. Can we get you to use that microphone, because I don't think without it, our TV broadcast will not pick up your voice. Or any microphone.
I need to be able to get that. Yeah, I have been described as a radical, and that's all true. I was in a rock band for a number of years and opened for stepping off in the James Gang. I partied with the Ullman brothers, so I have things I really don't think we should discuss at a school board meeting. Since I became a professor, one of the most common questions that I'm asked in my talks and speeches involves textbook bias. Parents constantly tell me my kid's book says XYZ, that's not right. Or, can you believe what's in my son's textbook? Students at meetings frequently come up and say, they're telling us Lincoln freed the slaves so he could have more soldiers, or the Rosenbergs were innocent. Some of these facts are, of course, flat wrong. They couldn't get any wronger, but getting history right involves more than just getting the correct facts. The mere selection of one fact over another is a process, it's a choice, and as such, it involves bias. So it's impossible to have a totally unbiased book. One can have a book full of accurate facts, but selected and arranged so as to be taken out of context and historical setting, so that it weakens or even destroys the actual reality. Context and proportion are absolutely necessary to getting the overall interpretation right, as well as getting the facts right. Some years ago, I wrote a book which was looked at the top 20 U.S. history textbooks. Now, many of these are college textbooks, but many have overlapped and are being used for AP history and general high school standard history classes. Two of them that come to mind are the American Pageant and the National Experience, which are probably two of the best-selling textbooks out there. So I'm only going to go over a few of these so you can get the flavor of this. I found a number of errors in these books, not just errors, but rather blatant errors, and I found that they were repeated over several books. So before we start talking about specifics, why don't we look at how historians who write these books apparently see America. If I asked you to think about the 20th century, and you look through these books, and you do as most students do, you just start by looking at the pictures. You don't read anything, you just look at the pictures. What are the most common pictures you see in the 20th century? I want to emphasize 20th century. Most common picture is FDR. No problem. I think that's perfectly reasonable depiction for any 20th century textbook. Second most common picture, something involving the atomic bomb. Yep, I think that's probably pretty appropriate. What's the third most common picture? John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Ronald Reagan, moon landing. Third most commonly represented image in the 20th century, Ku Klux Klan. How about this? You're looking at pictures, and all these books correctly identify John Wilkes Booth as the man who shot Kennedy. And they all correctly identify him as a Confederate, Lincoln. Lincoln. And I'm getting Kennedy. And they all correctly identify him as a Confederate. Now, one or two might mention the fact that he is an actor, but he doesn't kill Lincoln because Lincoln gives him a bad review. He kills Lincoln because he has fundamental differences with Lincoln in terms of their political viewpoint. So how is this man, the man that shot Kennedy, portrayed in almost all of these books with only one exception out of the 20? A Marine, a former Marine, an ex-Marine, a deranged Marine. Only one of them correctly identifies him as a communist. That, according to Oswald at least, he shot Kennedy because he has communist views and Kennedy was opposed to those views. So I think that tells us a little bit about the perspective of the people who write these textbooks. That's why Mike Allen and I wrote Patriot's History of the United States in 2004, and it later became New York Times #1 bestseller in 2010. We were tired of the bias and the overall interpretation that America was a rotten place and that the U.S. was defined more by its weaknesses than by its strengths, more by its sins than by its generosity or its courage. Patriot's History is in use in over 30 colleges and universities. It's the main text at the University of Missouri. It's in use at University of Texas A&M, Rice, surprisingly at the University of California, Santa Cruz, University of California, Irvine, Utah State, Washington, Montreat, dozens more. It's in use in hundreds of high schools across the country, again, mostly in AP classes. If the choice is to simultaneously teach from People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn and Patriot's History, we revel in that choice. Our indications are we win that competition every time. So let's look at just a few of these. Shot of the Transcontinental Railroad. Virtually all of the texts I looked at, not everyone, but most of them, said something to the effect of the railroads could not have been built without federal support. That government support was essential to building the railroads. Well, there's a small problem with this, and that is that James J. Hill, a one-eyed Canadian, that's his eyeball down there in the corner, a one-eyed Canadian built the Great Northern Railroad without a dime of federal support. And when the Panic of 1873 and the Panic of 1893 hit, all of the subsidized government-built railroads failed. But James J. Hill's railroad stayed afloat and kept profitable. Why? Because he had to build it profitable from the get-go because he had no government help. You probably remember this image, the crying Indian famous shot from the Keep America Beautiful campaign. If you don't remember the ad, Iron Eyes Cody rides his pony across a prairie, and there's smokestacks belching stuff in the background. The key scene is he gets to the top of a ridge, and he looks out and he thinks he's going to see beautiful mountains or whatnot, and he sees a highway, and a bag of like McDonald's comes flying through and hits at his feet and breaks all over, and this tear trickles down his face. Well, it's all fake. The tear was glycerin. The Indian was a Sicilian born in Louisiana named Espera de Cordy, and although he wasn't an Indian in real life, he played one on TV and the movies over 100 times. This led to a number of depictions in the textbooks that I found, some of them pretty just crazy, about stories of whites in the buffalo, and the upshot was the whites almost killed all of the buffalo. We have 3 new, very good academic books that have come out in the last 15 years. One by an anthropologist at Harvard, one by a historian at Princeton, and one by Dan Flores at the University of Missoula, Montana. All 3 of them deal with the Indians and the ecosystem. And all 3 come to the same conclusion, which is that the Indians were depleting the buffalo supply and were on the way to eradicating the buffalo before whites ever got there. They all agree, as do I, the whites accelerated the process, and the people like Buffalo Bill Cody, armed with rapid-fire weapons and long-range weapons, were going to accelerate the process. But then none of the history books mention the first fact, all of them mention the second, and then none of them mention the very critical third fact, which is that it was white ranchers and farmers and philanthropists who saved the buffalo. John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, donated 20,000 acres in the West, specifically to be used as a buffalo preserve. Charles Goodnight, of the famous Goodnight Trail, the cattle king, captured buffalo calves and began cultivating his own herd, which about 20 years later he donated to Canada, which became the basis of the Wood National Park, Bison Park, and a herd of about 14,000. Over and over again, it was people like Bill Cody, who had once hunted the buffalo, later took them on tours to generate funds to save the buffalo. None of this is mentioned in a single one of the textbooks. The Indians, it appears, according to Eisenberg and Kretsch and Dan Flores, many of them, not all of them, but many of them had views that the buffalo were inexhaustible. And one of them believed that buffalo herds came from a lake in Canada, kind of my students' view of their parents' funding. So you don't get a full picture from these various books. The worst depictions I came across were in the chapters on Reagan. And in my book, I had 4 separate entries on the Reagan years, but we'll only do one here, especially on the economy. Some facts about the Reagan years: there were 14, these are pretty undisputed facts, there were 14 million net new jobs created in the Reagan years, 14 million. Now, in the Bush-Obama years combined, there haven't even been close to 9 million. So in just 8 years of Reagan, there were 14 million net new jobs. How many net new jobs did Europe create in that 8-year period? 0. So the economic growth was rather astounding. Do any of the textbooks mention that? Do any of them mention the 14 million figure? No, not one. All of them, without exception, deal with the deficits and the debt, supposedly, that occurred under the Reagan years. This is a chart that I took directly from the book American Pageant. Again, probably the best-selling U.S. history textbook out there. The heading is off the chart, but the heading is deficits. And you can see that the deficits 1980, 85, 88 went way up, and the student is supposed to take from this chart that, Reagan was crazy and look at those deficits and how horrible they are. The problem is up in the left-hand corner where it says billions of dollars. And any economist will know that there's a word missing. And the word that's missing is real, as in real dollars. The data, it seems, is not adjusted for inflation. And I think it's done so deliberately, but we'll see that later. And so I took their data and I adjusted it for inflation. And then I asked the question, you know, isn't how much you owe relative to how much you make? If the U.S. made a lot more in the 1980s than it did in the 1960s, shouldn't that be reflected in the data? So I adjusted it for GNP, and so here's the real chart. Deficits as a share of GNP. Again, you can see the rather shocking visual difference. And again, the pictures are what students usually look at first. And so this is going to make an impression before anything else does. But you could say these are historians, they're not economists, they just made a mistake. It was just an honest error, except same chapter, same topic, i.e. Reagan's an idiot. And this time you have a chart, again the title is off the top, and it's the national debt, which is of course all the deficits added together. And again, you can see the visual depiction is that the debt just went absolutely nuts in the Reagan years. And again, this is a false depiction because it's not adjusted in real dollars as a share of GNP. So I did their work for them. That's the chart. You can see visually, it's not even the same. You want to see it overlaid. Oops. You want to see it overlaid. It's not a perfect overlay, but you get an idea of how radically different it is. The debt was much higher in FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and part of Nixon's term than it was as a share of GNP in most of Reagan's term, and was way higher under Kennedy, Eisenhower, Truman, and Roosevelt. They do something else here, though, that I found interesting. The bars that indicate periods, it's very subtle, but they wanted to reinforce in the student's mind, I think, that this was Reagan's problem, that Reagan caused it. And you know, some of you may remember the old Sesame Street game. Three of these things are kind of the same thing. One of these things is not quite the same. And they'll have a parakeet and a parakeet and a parakeet and a boa constrictor. And you're supposed to say which one's different, and the kid says it's the boa constrictor. Well, let's play a Sesame Street game here. We have depression, which is an event. World War II breaks out, which is an event. Japan surrenders, which is an event. Korean War breaks out, which is an event. Vietnam, which is an event. And Reagan, which is a person. That's a very subtle little change, but a very important change that, again, the student will pick up on. So, I could go on and on with these. I'll close with just one anecdote. About 4 years ago, I was contacted by an instructor at the State University of New York system, which is certainly not considered a conservative system. And he was teaching the citizenship class for new immigrants seeking to become citizens. He was using a standard high school government civics book, and he said that his students were averaging 65% on their tests. He was distraught. He said even more disturbing, they were leaving the citizenship class with a negative view of the United States. On his own, he began teaching them from Patriots History of the United States, our book. Mind you, this was not a history class, but a citizenship class. The scores jumped into the 90s, and he noted that the students came out with a much more positive view of the United States than they previously had. I jokingly challenged him to see if his superior at SUNY would adopt the book, and I think there's no way. The superior actually agreed to a test. Half the class would be taught with Patriots History, and half the class would be taught with the civics textbook. The teacher then sent me the raw scores. The new immigrants using Patriots history averaged about 20 points higher than those using the other book, and not one of them failed. To my shock, State University New York system adopted Patriots history for its citizenship class, and all I could think of was the movie Here Comes the Boom, and that great little scene at the end where they all become citizens. So that's my rabble-rousing and entirely partisan review for you guys tonight.
Can I ask a couple of questions of Professor? Sure. And if you wouldn't mind answering at the microphone again so we can get you on that.
Can we hear you?
Testing.
Let me try to get as close as I can. Well, thank you, Dr. Schweiger. I appreciate the presentation. I guess, could you talk for a minute about why it matters whether history is taught correctly, and what the importance of that is?
Sure. You may know of a quotation by Margaret Thatcher. Watch your thoughts because your thoughts become your words. Watch your words because your words become your actions. Watch your actions because your actions become your habits. Watch your habits because your habits become your character. And watch your character because your character becomes your destiny. When you attack on a steady basis, and I think that liberal historians have done, the nation's past, it's a deliberate attempt to change our words about what we say about ourselves and who we see ourselves as being. And it's an attack on the nation's character, which in turn is an attack, I think, on our destiny. So it's important to get this right, not just from the standpoint that students know the facts, although it's a very interesting debate that's going on in higher education now. Since I've been at UD, maybe for the last 15 years, there has been a huge move away from teaching the facts. And Marty, do you remember this at all? Yeah. We don't want to teach names and dates and that sort of, that's not important. We want to teach concepts and themes. Well, the problem with this is you don't need more than 30 minutes to teach a few concepts and themes. And the concepts and themes may be translatable, but the facts are not. You have to master the building blocks of history before the concepts and themes become relevant. So I think it's essential for us to understand our current position in the world and our destiny and our character, that we understand our past.
And just another question for you. Do you find that students are leaving high school with a good understanding of government? I'm sure that you encounter a number
No.
of
Now, it's always difficult to tell if when you're asking a question in class, if the students know the answer and just don't want to talk, don't want to say it, they're hesitant to talk. But just from teaching U.S. history classes, they don't know the branches of government. They don't know the terms that people serve. They don't know the checks and balances system. They don't know where the system came from. They don't know the Constitution. I asked how many had read the Constitution. Not one in my Western Civ class of 38 had ever read the U.S. Constitution. I asked who'd read the Declaration before. Not one had ever read the Declaration.
And would you talk for a minute about why it's important that they understand government?
Well, we today have what's called the low information voter. And the low information voter, according to the pundits, are voters who get most of their information from E! Channel and Entertainment Tonight, things like that. And you can't make sound decisions about who to vote for, what policies to support, and policies to oppose, if you don't have an idea about how it works in your government, about who is funding the government, about who is supposed to pass, for example, funding bills or tax bills. Where do they originate? Why? What's the purpose behind having them start in the House of Representatives as opposed to the Senate? What's the purpose behind having Supreme Court justices appointed for life, as opposed to senators who only serve 6 years? What was the thinking behind that? Well, behind all of it was a distrust of government. And it was a concern about tyranny at all levels. And everything the founders did, often for different reasons. Hamilton was afraid of the tyranny of the masses. Jefferson was afraid of the tyranny of the elites. But whatever it was, they were all afraid of the tyranny of government when one group or another got its hands on government. And so that's why I think it's important.
And one of the, I guess, challenges that I hear presented to us is how do we make history interesting for high school students? How do we keep them engaged? Do you have any advice on?
Get good teachers. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. If you've got a good teacher, I could teach basket weaving to Navajos because I'm a good teacher. And some of my colleagues at UD are excellent teachers, and if they've never ridden a horse before, they could teach you how to ride a horse because they're good teachers. If you get good teachers, your students will be interested in the subject.
Thank you very much for coming.
Chance questions.
Just real quick, and I think this is cool, you've got a sixth grader, like we both have sixth graders. Last year in fifth grade, I spent a long time for social studies going over we are teaching them in Springboro schools because we memorized all of it and we had to go through everything and we had to talk about checks and balances and stuff. So, Mr. Regano, our kids are learning that. I mean, if they're learning that in fifth grade, I've got to assume it's following them up. But
Oh,
they're definitely
I can only
learning.
speak from the experience at UD.
Sure, I'm just,
And
maybe they forgot.
I teach
but-
about between 70 and sometimes 100 students a semester. I've done so for 27 years. And the ability, the cognitive ability of students to deal with these issues, cognitive ability is fine, but their building blocks of what they know has deteriorated steadily for the last year.
And would you say that they have a decent recall of facts and events, but maybe don't understand principles?
No. I would say that they don't know facts and events, that they've been let down in teaching the basic facts and dates and all the things that historians no longer want to teach because they're so busy talking about concepts.
And I don't think this presentation was any kind of attack on teaching, but you're talking about textbooks maybe omitting information that you would register as pretty important for them to know, for students to know. So we have to be careful with possibly our textbook selections. I know my family is taking the IOTC course on the Constitution, and my daughter, who is a history buff, turns and looks at me often and smiles and said, "We didn't learn that." So there are quite a few things that are being taught there. So I think even having a variety of opportunities for the children to learn history is helpful too. And even if it's not within the district, it might be somewhere else. And parents should have those opportunities to be able to find history and do some analyses and do some, let me take you here and let's learn about this. Because I know there's some online courses kids can take. I mean, there should be a lot of opportunities and a lot of options. And I think we offer one option here, but there's other options out there people can investigate too. And I appreciated that the textbooks may be a problem and we have to be careful what we select. I appreciate that. Okay, well, thank you very much for your
Anyone
time.
else? Yes, back here.
Yes, you may not recognize me. I'm actually your colleague from UD.
Yes.
Anthropologist, we're on the same
Mhm.
Yes. I actually have a question about your use of the word correct, and I'm thinking about social location. So, are you suggesting that we all have one history? Because once you put in race, class, and gender, history is a whole different thing, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that.
As a conservative, I reject concepts of race, class, and gender. So I just,
You mean you reject it when you don't think that?
I don't think that they exist. I don't think they're a reality. And I don't think certainly that it's something that should guide our teaching. I think other things should.
I mean, I'm an anthropologist. I
Mhm.
teach race, I teach gender, I teach class.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure I understand that they say.
Well.
As a woman, I know that.
And that's your freedom to teach things the way you see fit. I don't mind. So-
Okay, well, we just had a presentation, and I appreciate your time. We're going to move on with the agenda items now, but thank you for your presentation
Thank you.
again. Okay, we have agenda item 3.1.
Is that road that railroad that? What you're talking about?
Yeah, I did.
Now we have approval of donation, $500 from Russell and then Shannon Jones and family to be used for scholarships for students that need to go to junior high Washington DC.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the donation. $500.
Yes. $500.
So moved.
Mr. Regano, is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Cole, any discussion? I'd like to extend a thank you to them. Thank you very much, and we will use it for the scholarship. Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Okay, roll call.
Regano,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Bowles,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Okay, 4.1, approval of consultant contract, and that would be Mrs. Vincent.
This is a contract entered in for an interim director of special education as an independent contractor.
That's it. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Regano, and I will second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Regano,
Yes.
Bowles,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
4.2, approval of substitute rate of pay for teachers.
These are the items that we discussed in work session at last board meeting. We are looking at the following substitute rate of pay for teachers. Starting salary would be $85 a day. After the 21st day, it would be $95 a day. After 61st day, it would be base salary of bachelor's degree step 0.
Okay, I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Well, I need a second. I will second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Cole,
Yes.
Bowles.
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Regano.
Yes.
4.3, Mrs. Vincent.
This is the tag along that we discussed about bus drivers and getting substitute bus drivers. So we are looking at a regular rate of pay for a route of being $14.50 and also field trip bus drivers being paid $14.
Need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Regano, any discussion? Roll call.
Cole,
Yes.
Regano,
Yes.
Bowles,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Okay, 4.4, approval of to create preschool team leader position.
Yes, this is for the new preschool that has begun this year, and this supplemental position was created in the preschool program budget that was presented to the board early last year.
Need a motion to approve? I will approve, or I will motion to approve. Need a second?
Second.
Mr. Regano, any discussion? Roll call.
Bowles,
Yes.
Regano,
Yes.
Miller, Cole.
Yes.
4.5.
This is a request for the approval of athletic game worker rates of pay. They are various, and there were 3 pages of attachments along with that.
I need a motion to approve. I will move to approve, and I need a second. Mr. Miller, Mr. Miller, any discussion, any questions?
I'm just looking at these fees with this and what we charge for these games, I mean, what we pay for these games and the outlay, and it's no wonder we have the athletic gap and the expenses associated with the different sports. You know, my kids are all in youth programs, so is there something that we can do along the lines of the students earning the $10 an hour to go towards their student fees, that if you have parents or somebody that would volunteer to collect against the, you know, the fee money coming in, or different things that we can do in a volunteer capacity. I mean, this starts to get really expensive if you look at what each event, just an idea. I know we have to pay people to get them to do things, but
Well, and isn't this based on on the new law the first time a lot of these have come forward.
Yes, it's what we've paid in the past, but because of the new law that came in January, everything has to go through the Treasurer's Department for taxation purposes.
And actually, Mr. Lewis has made some modifications to some of these payments and how many people we have, so on and so forth. So it has been looked at, but it does take a lot of people to look at it.
I mean, I'm just saying, volleyball games, I can't imagine that the sales aren't necessarily real high. So if I have a freshman player and a JV player and a varsity player, and the varsity parent's willing to work the freshman and JV game to collect the tickets at the gate, is there a way that we can get some sort of cost savings that would, not for here, later?
Anything is an option.
But I do appreciate the discussion, because we are trying to reduce that gap. There's about $100 and some thousand gap between what the pay to play and other things generate, other revenues generate, and what the district has to pay. We're really trying to get sports to a place where it pays for itself. And we're trying to fill that gap with ways of accommodating, and at this price tag aside. I've looked at all of those too. I felt the same thing myself. It was a couple of years ago, but I couldn't come up with a remedy in my own head. So I think it's a great idea though to look at this and say, is there, because now we've opened up those opportunities for kids to earn money, and maybe it's that our 17 and 18-year-olds can earn the money towards credit, towards pickup, or something to that effect.
Well, to answer some of that, we always want 2 of our employees there. Actually, Officer Don does not come to all of us. Last year he did, this year he is not coming to all of us. That's one modification we made. But you need 2 adults there in the event that there is a safety issue or someone gets into an argument. One person would have to be able to control the situation and call the police while the other controls the event itself. So we definitely need at least 2 adults there that work for us every time. So we have to do that.
I just know from my own children's events, I'm typically working the clock or being a line judge or doing something along those lines, or taking money at the gate. All of us kind of contribute in order to keep the costs down, and if there's a way to do that, maybe people would be willing to, maybe nobody wants to volunteer. We can move on to the next agenda item.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question too. On these positions, I mean, we rehire these every year. Do we post them every year? I mean, does that happen? Do we repost these jobs and let new people who might be interested also compete for these?
I can't speak to that because that does not go through the Human Resource Department, that would go through the athletic. It would be something that the athletic director would have.
How about some of the academic clubs and those? Gymnastics, for example, high school team counselor advisor. I'm just picking them out here.
They're on a yearly contract.
I'm sorry.
You jumped ahead back on the lines.
So it,
But I'm glad you brought that up, though, because that is one of the, at the end of the year, one of the things that we need was, we paid for through the principal's fundraiser. All of those clubs were added back to high school that last year supposedly were reduced. They are all there.
okay, well, I'll hold that question for the next one.
I need what we were discussing. How about any further discussion? Okay, roll call.
Coles?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Donovan?
Yes.
Yes.
Agenda item 4.6. Personnel items.
To go through this somewhat quickly, we have 372 items this evening. And as if you had a chance to look through it, but basically we have the general, some resignations and classified substitute employee hires. We have a bunch of athletic temporary help, which has to go, like we described before, through the treasurer's office. We have a lot of supplemental personnel. These are all of the supplementals I think Mr. Regano was talking about, the non-athletic supplementals. We also have all of our volunteers that are to be approved tonight for Camp Kern, and that way they fall under our liability insurance. We also have approval of classified extended days for bus drivers and for cafeteria workers to get our school up and running first couple of days of school. And that brings us to item 372.
Great. I need a motion to approve the personnel items in 4.6. I would move to approve the personnel items. Need a second?
I'll second.
That's Mr. Regano. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Well, I did ask my question, which was, is there an opportunity for people to apply and interview for these year to year? Since we do approve them every year, is there an opportunity for people who might be interested to compete and apply for these?
I think it varies from school to school. For example, we had the combination of the team leader positions at both 5 Points and at Dennis, where we had two groups of team leaders come together, and they just kind of worked that out themselves at Dennis, where one group didn't want to do it any longer, but there were others that did. So the principal worked through that process. But at 5 Points, it was all posted, and there was only one person interested for each position. At the high school, there are some, they're yearly contracts, and people that have done it for years have been very successful. Normally just carry on. The ones that are open are advertised for, and if there's more than one person, then they would interview by the principal, and then the principal would pick. So it varies.
So, well, I guess, is there a problem? I mean, all of these result in, except for the volunteer positions, obviously, they all result in a little extra pay for whoever is selected. And it's, I guess I'm wondering why we can't open that opportunity up to kind of give people who might be interested in doing that a chance to share in that extra pay. Just as a fairness, maybe they're at a disadvantage to somebody who has some experience in there, but why not open that up and give people the opportunity to apply and basically sell themselves as maybe somebody with new ideas, fresh ideas that we might want to try in that position.
The supplemental contracts are part of the union bargaining agreement. I have not seen the new one to know where we've gone with that, whether there is a process different than what I'm describing right now, or if there's a possibility that would have to be bargained into that or not. So I can do further research on that.
If you would, please. My recollection is that the contract stipulates the rates of pay, but it doesn't stipulate who's entitled to those positions. So just off the top of my head, I think that what I'm suggesting as an idea that could be opened up, I think it's possible.
And like I said, in some circumstances, what you've described happens. And also, on the other side of the coin is the fact that if you have someone in that position that's done it for 8 or 10 years and it's a very successful program, then you could open it up, but most likely no one else is going to theoretically maybe go for it because there's somebody that is sort of like the football coach. If they're a successful football coach, then we don't go recruiting someone else. So it all varies.
The board did not say they're looking at for a new.
No, the board is not looking for a new football coach.
I don't want that on topics later tonight.
I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I understand that experience is a factor, but there are other factors, and it just seems that if I was a junior employee and was ambitious and was trying to better myself and was interested in helping in some of these capacities, that I might like to have that opportunity to apply for that, and if it's never posted or I just think we ought to have a general practice as opposed to just letting whoever decide whether it's going to happen. But I appreciate if you look into that, to the contract issue and let us know.
I'd be happy to.
So contract, and then Tracy mentions it's possible that it's somewhere in ORC we offer it to a certain district in place. I don't think so. I think it would be in the commercial negotiated agreement perhaps.
But I guess to me that's a bigger, for me personally, that's a bigger issue. Just see a lot of these retirees still holding positions that they were held before me because people don't have to get retired, or it's just,
What type of
just
position?
Like a girls soccer athletic manager, it's $1,334. I'm assuming that's the second adult there at the event to keep things under control. Is that?
Typically at any of our events, we'll have a site man. And then a lot of the times, Mr. Lewis goes as well. Or Officer Don there, Officer Don is there. Or we have a building administrator there.
another one that kind of sticks out is you see, now I'm not saying, once again, not saying people aren't worthy or whatever, but it's just I see Mr. Payne still on here, which is someone else. It just kind of looks odd to me when you see people that have retired, and they're still on their collective or something. Most likely included.
Well, having to follow the contract. Under the law, so it's not my understanding we have. However, we'll definitely be happy to check it out.
So what do we do for now? Are you interested in tabling the issue or approving all but? Or are you proposing anything or just asking for next year for there to be an opening, a round of opening these positions and we list them somewhere that everybody interested can apply, or at least a letter of intent, a letter of interest? That if we resolve this, should we put it back on the work session agenda to talk about?
Me personally, I would like to understand the contract states as far as people that are retired and still. But I mean, I don't know, if this is gonna cause an issue holding on for 2 weeks, then let's not. Personally, I think.
Would you like just the ones that,
Can you exclude the retirees?
I don't have those highlighted?
And it all depends if they're coaching and we hold them off, they've already started, and
And the band
pull them
also.
off the field.
So if it's already started, it's a little late for us to give it away.
I guess I just like, I mean, it's fine, it kind of is what it is, in my opinion, because I would like some understanding of.
We do need to understand, when school starts in summer, I mean, this is 400 employees. I mean, we have almost 6,000 kids that we're trying to provide services to. It's close to impossible before school starts to get every single one of these approved. And technically, we don't have to by law. We can get some of these started. I realize the board needs to approve these, but we also have to be able to get through things. And we're happy to look at these. Yeah, it is going to cause some serious confusion when we have to put
I
these
agree.
off or not.
I personally, I get what you're saying, but I do think though that that's going to be the responsibility of the administration. That they need to understand what the contract states as far as if you have retired, you get first right of refusal to the position.
Right, I 100% agree. 100% agree. But yeah, it will be difficult for you because we have a lot of supplemental positions for after-school clubs and things of that nature. We're going to have to delay those by 2 weeks if we don't get those approved. Who knows what else is on there for those 400 employees? And another thing, to be perfectly honest, is bringing it all to you. And it's probably the first time we've seen it in a lot of these board meetings because it's all here to be questioned. I mean, we're trying to be as transparent as possible as we can and get this done
Could I
properly.
propose that I bring to work session a process to look at supplementals and perhaps some other school districts and how they do that? Tracy and I can look at the ORC code and bring back some ways that we can look at it.
We may develop a policy on that too that makes us all feel more comfortable with the process. I think that's a great idea. Put it on a work session agenda.
Yeah, like I said, for me personally, I'm more concerned with the ORC, the contract states, because those are bigger than everything else. And I agree, you need to look at it, but with that contract specifically stated that first right of refusal goes to employees, that we need to make sure that the employees are getting that first right of refusal.
I agree, we have a lot of new employees that may love to do some of these extra positions. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, as you look through the list too, you see that a lot of times, one employee holds multiple supplementals. And so if it's just tradition that keeps them in those spots, I really think in fairness that we ought to open them. So, anyway, I appreciate your delving into
Cool. Okay, we're going to put agenda item 5, 6, and 7 combined, and it's board member reports, comments, questions, future considerations, public announcements. Mr. Miller, we start with you.
So I guess, first of all, I thought the presentation tonight on the textbook was very educational, to be honest. I did appreciate the fact that understanding students where I struggle is when, if we have an issue with our textbooks or textbook promotion, and making sure we get what's best for the students. I absolutely believe that we need to continue to look at that. Where I get turned off and where I struggle is that the wives have to be a libertarian, and the wives have to be conservative. Why are we just not trying to get the best textbook for our kids? So I challenge the board, the future board, and the administration to get politics out and start worrying about what's
I totally agree with that, and that's what I'm trying to make sure of.
How rude is that? How rude is that? That's just terrible. To sit there and laugh. You know, I have the same concern that Dr. Schweigert has, and as I read these books, and you know, I form my basis not by what some conservative pundit says, but I go back and read the original text. And that's what the state law now requires us to do with respect to the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance, and the Ohio Constitution. It requires us to read the original text in the original context. And how can anybody object to going back to the original documents? That is history. And whether it has a little bit of religion in it, and frankly it does, because religion is a part of history. You know, Mr. Blakely, sorry, skipping here, but I'll go ahead and go back to you. Mr. Blakely got a lot of kudos this week for explaining to his school about 9/11, because those kids are of the age where 9/11, back in 2001, they were just little kids. They don't have a concept for what happened. And this country was attacked, and 3,000 people died in that event. And we were attacked in part because of what our country stands for. And they need to understand why we're attacked and why the people who attacked us did it. And that gets to their beliefs. And if you were to leave religion out of that story, you're misstating history. So religion is a part of history, and if you're going to teach it correctly, it needs to be a part where it's appropriate. It needs to be factual. It needs to be unbiased. And that's why we go to the original documents, and we look at what the founders and the framers wrote, and we look at what they read, and we looked at what informed them so that they could develop documents that are unique in all of the world. Our Constitution, there's been Vladimir Putin's talking about an American exceptionalism. But what he misunderstands is that it's not about being egotistical that Americans are better. It's that our country formed a government. The founders 240 years ago created a form of government that unleashed the spirit of all humanity. And in the time since this country has been founded, we've gone from horse travel to space travel, from written communications to wireless communications around the world. And that was in no small part because of our form of government. And if kids don't understand that, where are we going to go in the future? They're not going to learn it if they're not taught it. And so it's incredibly important that they understand those founding principles. And I resent the fact that somebody's laughing at that topic. That to me is inexcusable.
I resent having to
And
listen
so-
to a lot of this, so I'm gonna leave, but thank you for sharing your conservative views with everybody here.
One of the other things that we had a presentation on was the Freedom Shrine. And we have parents who are interested in trying to push that forward. I'd like to know what the board can do to get those documents. The Freedom Shrine has a number of founding documents that could be posted on the walls of our school buildings. And I'd like to know what we can do to move that project forward. We have a parent ready and willing to volunteer to help do that. And if it takes a little bit of money or purchase on the district's part, I'd like to go ahead and get that authorized to get that money approved so that those documents can be out there. So whatever we can do to move that forward, because kids need to know this stuff. And I share Dr. Swider's concern that the kids are, maybe it's better in Springboro than it is in a lot of school districts. But kids need to understand this stuff, and if he's telling us that most kids don't understand that when they get to college, that is a monumental problem for this country. One other topic. Kelly and I and Mr. Petrie had the opportunity to meet with leaders for Springboro schools on the upcoming budget. And I think we had a fantastic discussion, working together, planning how we can try to make sure that this levy passes on November 5th. And they're working on how we can get signage out in the community, and we have Mr. Petrie and Mrs. DeRosa working on information pieces. So I just wanted to mention that I think that there's a lot of great collaboration going on there. I'm thankful for the NFS folks for their willingness to do that. Perhaps we've had a rough year and a half together, but I think that at this point it's worth acknowledging that folks are coming together for this common purpose of trying to make sure that this renewal levy passes in November. So thank you very much to these ladies for that. I'm sorry for jumping out of the school. I could not let that stand.
Real briefly, the dress code. My 9-year-old daughter said, "Mom, you got that board meeting tonight. You're gonna talk about that dress code, right?" And it kind of makes me chuckle because it's an issue in our house, especially with the clothing that's made for young girls. However, we take the dress code seriously in our house, and I want to make sure that we adhere to it. And I appreciate all the emails from the principals reinforcing that as it being a distraction. This past weekend, my husband, children, and I were going into one of the local establishments, and I kind of go both ways. Like, is the dress code really that big of a deal? But as I have employees that work for me, yeah, your dress code's a big deal. But back to my point, as I was walking into Roosters in the middle of the day on Saturday, there's our athletic team, a female athletic team's poster up, which gorgeous girls, but I actually watched a grown man grope the poster of one of our Springboro students in high school. That was absolutely disgusting to me. And a few words came out of my mouth, and my husband thought I was going to meet this gentleman and drag him out in the parking lot over what happens. Obviously, I toned it down a little bit, but it is really important how we're sending our daughters out, because I never in a million years thought one of our athletic posters would be, that I would, had I not witnessed that, I wouldn't feel as passionately as I do about what I'm sending my daughters out of the house in. So.
Sounds conservative. Anyway, I do think it's important to be respectful, and I've said that. I just certainly didn't laugh at what Mrs. Benjamin had to say. I don't think that would be appropriate. I totally disagree with 100% of what people have to say sometimes, but it's certainly disrespectful to laugh and speak out and to be rude. So let's try not to do that. We're trying to be adults and set examples for the kids in the audience, and I think that's important to continue to do that. We may not agree with the message, but the messenger has the right, and we have the responsibility to let them speak when it's time for them to speak. So a board meeting, we try to get the business done, and if the business is talking about, our opportunities for our students, that's important. And we have the right to invite anybody we wish to speak. this isn't the time to speak. You can speak maybe at the work session during the public participation part of that. But we're going to end this meeting. Also this weekend, I went to a meeting at Notre Dame. I got some really good information from Notre Dame about, the students. Common Core was the topic of the whole presentation. I'll talk more about that in work session. Really important. But also my daughter was there for a college visit, and she got to talk to admissions, and we learned a lot about what they need to see. And I'm going to keep doing homework, and I'm going to keep asking the admissions offices what our students need to be competitive to their colleges, because as we get more and more costly education, we need our students to get in the money more often so that they can afford these institutions that we want to send them to. So it's really important we do our homework, and I have volunteered since I've got one at that stage to do a lot of the homework from admissions offices asking what we need. It's important that we talk to two professors of the law, the College of Law there, so really good information. But again, I thank Mr. Schweiger for his presentation. It was very informative. I think that it's extremely important that we get American history correct. And what I have seen from some of the assignments is it was not correct. In fact, every resource out there told me that the Zen book was missing huge pieces. You had to have a PhD to decipher what was missing. Our students aren't ready for that. You've got to have some basis first and then build on that. And you can bring the Zen book in perhaps in college, but they said it would take a PhD, so it's probably in your doctoral program that you can decipher what's wrong with some books. We have to make sure at this level we get it right. And I think that's important to bring in some experts to help us get that right. Anyway, we're going to have a 10-minute recess, and then we're going to reconvene in the library for the work session. Thank you. Reconvening for the September 12, 2013 Springboro Board of Education meeting. Call this back to order. And the first order of business is 8.1, committee reports. And Mr. Attorney's not here, so can you do both committees? Have you met?
The Budget Finance has not met since our last meeting, so there's not much to report on that front. But Mrs. Jarvis has something that she wants to report on.
I'm good.
Okay.
We have our next, like I said, we have our next meeting scheduled, and the agenda will be out probably, I don't know, next week or for tomorrow.
And the policy committee did meet. And I'll say more of a discussion. We didn't generate any draft policies or anything like that. We just generated more homework. Talking about policies, a whole group of them, 2110 through, I'll say 2230. Those are all around curriculum and how curriculum is developed. And we're just continuing to review those at this point. Mrs. Vincent and myself took homework assignments to review those and maybe make some markups so we had something specific to talk about. We have not set the next policy committee meeting. Eyeballing September 20th. Tomorrow, the following Friday. I know there's budget finance committee meeting that morning. And I guess I'm hoping that like 10:30 or something might work for the policy committee.
What time is the budget?
9,
Is that what we said, 9 o'clock?
yes,
So
we switched.
I'm guessing that 10:30 is probably a good time to try to squeeze a policy committee. But I will I'll send that request to Ashley in the morning if I remember, and maybe she can check everybody's calendar and see if that works. That's all.
Okay, great. All right, 8.2 is, I don't have any committee meetings. We didn't have one. 8.2, discussion of school lunches, and it's on me because I wanted to share. I know we keep bringing this up, but I'm just making sure that I represent the community members who are saying, well, what's up? What can we do? Can we do anything about the school lunch? And the same complaints from last year, much of the same, so nothing new there. But this time, well, sure, this time I'm hearing something else, which is something about And of course, the school board gets blamed, so I'm curious. But something about not having trays for their food, that they have to get it on small plates. So each item is separate on a small plate, and they have to stack their plates in their hands and walk to their table. Is there such a thing? Is there a process for change?
We've done away with the plastic trays because so many animals ended up in the trash. When they wouldn't bring them to the dish room, they would just throw them in the trash.
Okay.
So we did go with the styrofoam tray, which I don't know that the size is that small, but they can put fries and eggs or a sandwich on it. The junior high has used similar trays for a couple of years because they don't have a dish room to return their trays to. So they've been using those. And I said, well, let's try it at the high school instead of keep buying trays and get certain trash that are expensive.
Okay.
We have the trays on the shelf that we had last year. We can bring those back out. And that's what we're looking to do.
Okay, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of proposing the difficulties I'm hearing and
Right.
seeing if we can kind of come up with some solution. So the other question was, if more people are packing, because I wonder if more are packing this year than packed last year, are you noticing any changes yet in the number?
We won't notice that until
Okay.
I do the reports at the end of the month.
It'll be a month, right, okay. And we were in a place before the federal intervention, we were at a place where we were generating revenue because we sold enough lunches. But if the school lunches are so dramatically reduced, what is our ability to generate revenue? And are we looking at maybe a net negative in the school lunch program? And if so, I'm just trying to throw out all these ideas. If so, we're talking about federal regulations that reduce our participation enough to impact the bottom line. And the bottom line has always been able to, not always, but in what, 5 years previously, had generated enough that it paid for equipment replacement, it paid for extras that you had, and it actually, we were going to use some of the surplus for some other initiative we had. So I'm kind of worried that we can dwindle down that surplus pretty quickly, and so should we make some changes or adjustments in the program right now? And you had mentioned that, well, part of the complaints were that kids weren't choosing foods. I get a lot of complaints at home, but one of my kids packs all the time, so she doesn't care. But my son, who's always very hungry and very slender, and I do worry about, I kind of pack a bag of nuts and put it in his backpack and say, nosh on this, you know, if you're really hungry. But him and a bunch of his buddies have decided that there's just not enough to eat that they like. So I wrestle, as a dietitian, I've always wrestled with this, because always as dietitians, we got complaints about school lunch, always. Even if it was the best school lunch on earth, we'd always get complaints, and I'd say, well, it comes down to, you know, I could supply the best diet in the world and put it on that tray. It doesn't mean they eat it. And so you wrestle with what will they actually consume versus how nourishing it is. And I think the federal government has decided we're going to offer these light, like low calorie options, smaller options, but they're not as likely to be eaten, is what I'm hearing. They're not picked. They don't like them, so they're not eating them. So again, we're still doing that wrestling match with what we give them as options and whether they'll eat it. So we can come up with a good diet, but how do we get the kids to eat it? Should we totally pull off of the federal program? And you had said that that's not financially feasible.
There's no way that we could with the salaries and the benefits and things that we pay.
Right, because our operations cost more. But we never did come up with numbers so that we could talk real numbers on what that means. And it may have changed now because we have less participation. So that's kind of where I am now. There's a new place on participation that we didn't have last year when you gave us all the information. We decided to keep it the way it is, don't change anything. But again, if we're going to start to lose money, now there's another piece of the formula we might have to talk about.
The government federal program that subsidized the lunchroom, we were at 18-20% participation here at the high school last year. The high school isn't really carrying us, it's the elementary kids and our free and reduced program. Our free kids, I mean, they're increasing every year, and we get money back from them, from the government. With being on the program, we got 6 cents more for being on the guidelines, meeting the guidelines with the federal program for each lunch that we sold, whether it was a kid that bought a free lunch or reduced lunch, it increased 6 cents more last year. This year, it's increased, I think it's like 12 cents with the 6 cents and with what they've increased for the.
Another 6.
Yeah.
So right now, you were saying that you can't tell until the end of the month, like on any given basis, on any given day, you don't know how many students bought versus how many.
We do, but I take it as a monthly thing,
Okay.
is the way, I mean, I could do that.
I just didn't know if the percentages are down on a daily basis.
And a lot of things I hear here at the high school is, we have 3 lunch lines for 1,600 kids. Our elementaries have 5 lines at 5 points and 4 lines at Dennis for 1,200 kids. The kids don't like waiting in line, so a lot of does pack lunch.
Sure.
I went out last year because a kid lost his retainer here at the high school. And the parent came in and she was panicking at the cost of the retainer. And you would not believe the whole packed lunches that I absolutely went through to try and find this kid. And the parent swore up down that that was her kid's lunch, one of her kids' lunch, that nothing was taken out of it. I mean, I don't care if they pack it from home or if they eat it here. They're not eating what they pack from home either. We see a lot of that. I mean, when I went through the retainers to try and
You
find.
mean my kids aren't eating their carrots and broccoli that I pack every
I
day?
doubt it. I doubt it.
And just so you know, I've dumpster dove for a set of retainers myself. I have done that. I know all that, yeah. That's $135 you just threw away. I guess what I'm hearing, and it's not that it's 100% of students, I'm just hearing this consistent. They want the fries back. Is that not doable under the new federal guidelines?
With the new guidelines, I have to say within the calories, and there's no way that I can do that.
What's the calorie max that you can offer on the regular lunch? If they bought the lunch tray,
They
what's
take it by the
total
week,
calorie?
and we figure it by the week.
What's that average to per day?
For the high school, I believe it's 800 calories over the week.
Per day, so it's
Yeah.
5 times 800, 4,000 calories.
No, it's 800 a day.
800, they take adjustment of the week.
4,000 a week, right, but you gotta divide it by 5 days, so you get 800 a day.
No,
No?
800 a week.
See, Jim, my teenager eats 800 a meal. I mean, teenagers do, teenage boys, 15, 16, 17, 18.
A normal diet for somebody like me who's as overweight as I am is like 1,500, 2,000 calories
A day.
a day.
So
I
what-
can't imagine
what
a
is
high
it?
school kid growing at the rate that they do, on 800.
I guess I'm asking, so
800 to 950, I think is the range.
A
for the
week.
high school.
So you divide that up among 5 days. It's only a couple hundred calories that they're allowed. Well, it's 200 calories.
What do you serve? Just carrots? I mean, 200 calories
I
a
know,
day?
I
that's-
have to offer more fresh fruits and vegetables.
Really?
Yeah.
200 calories doesn't do it for these people, for these kids. I mean, even, I would never, as a dietitian, recommend a child eat 200 calories, and that's it for lunch.
And that's why they're taking a lot of the sodium and stuff out, because the less sodium, the less calories.
Which
and
makes
it's
it
just
less palatable.
fat. I mean,
I mean, we're really, I'm just thinking, it's sounding pretty miserable. Well, there's options that other schools are looking into. So here's what I'm hearing from across the state. So they are looking into it. I don't know that anybody's bought one of the plans, but they said we could do, and I thought you presented something like this last year, somebody had this idea. You can present where the whole school goes back, and then you offer a sack lunch to those free and reduced if they want to buy, right? Some schools have said, we're not gonna provide school lunch, everybody's gonna bag lunch, but the food service will provide bag lunches for, and then you just put stuff in there. They've done away with all food service.
Well, I mean,
Well, no, that's-
that's part of the lunch.
But it would be on the federal program for those kids. Right, to be a bag lunch, not a hot lunch.
Right.
Right.
I think what
Well,
we need
that's
to do.
true. For those students, then you would be on the federal program. And they get a 200-calorie bag.
I think part of the
I'm gonna
issue
slip
is,
them a brownie.
are we losing money because kids aren't eating because they have a whopping 200-calorie meal?
And an
So-
unpalatable option, that's not your fault. I'm
And
not-
it's unpalatable. So I think we need to at least go a month here, and then let's pull and compare the revenues from last year to this year, and let's see if it's dropping. And if it is, I mean, I think it's something we definitely need to track. But I think we also need to know how much is it cost to operate nutrition if we don't take the federal money.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the money's a part of it, but having kids nourished enough that they can function through the day is another part of it. And, I don't know what the balance is, but, if we were off the federal program, what would the price of lunches need to be to make up the difference?
That's another thing.
I don't know, but, I think parents pay more for a quality lunch. And if they knew their kids were getting good food, that they would eat. Might also be something, as a retreat for a student committee to be involved
Well,
in.
yeah,
So,
because I would like to hear from the kids and see what they think.
But if it's not financially something we can do, but I think we can. I mean, I would pay that $4 for my son to have a good lunch, one that he would eat. Because right now, I think he's probably piling that pile up, walking to the table and not eating, because nothing sounds good. He might still be eating. I'm just thinking we need to offer them something they'll eat, which is always tough for a dietitian to try to come up with. But I know they eat French fries. I once did a PowerPoint presentation at Miami where I was a professor, and I said, well, why do we say an apple a day keeps the doctor away? And the class would come up with all these great things, fiber, water, lots of nutrition. And the fact is, when you put up the bar chart, it has little of nothing in it. It really is just water and fiber. And I'd say, well, why don't we say a ho-ho a day keeps the doctor away? Because I put up the bar chart to that, and there are huge bars all over on the nutrients. I'd say, well, I'm all for that one. And then I could put up chips. So I put up a bag of chips bar chart next to a French fry bar chart, same 100 ounces, next to a baked potato. And the bars were exactly the same across them. It's just the French fries and chips, of course, have more oil, so they're, but they have sustained glucose levels too because of that. So, I mean, it's really a wrestling match. We got to get them nourished. But in this district, I'm not sure that obesity is our issue. But nourishing the kids is a bigger issue right now. I mean, we worry about what issue is bigger. Financing it is always important, but I would pay that difference. My kid. Pardon? Yeah. Why don't we go on and I'll get your input because there's one more agenda item. Okay, so are there any other questions or discussions? So we're going to look at the money at the end of the month, try to see where we're falling. Are we still on the plus side of financing this? Are we still able to provide the equipment purchases if we need them? I guess, one of the things we used to have to do as dietitians in school is we had to do plate waste, and we often went to schools and we would watch before the kids threw it out. We'd write down real fast what was on their plate. So again, you could say, I provided them with 100% of their US RDA needs for that meal, but how much of it did they toss?
Right.
So it has to be palatable. All right, so can we see you back here next work session?
Well, John will
Will that
bring
be
the money into things.
No, the next one's still in this month, so we're trying to wait till October.
First and fifth.
Yep.
Tracy?
It is. Yeah. You can come on the 5th, but it's a Saturday, so.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, since there's nothing else with that one, we'll move on. Thank you, Sarah. 8.3 is park field test participation, Mrs. Strickberger.
Yes, we have been selected to participate in the 2014 park field testing, and that is in all of our buildings. At least one grade level will participate. That's in language arts, reading, language arts, and math. Being able Actually, in talking with the principals, are pretty excited. It'll give us an opportunity to get a snapshot of what it's going to look like as we transition from OAs to the park assessment. So I think because it's online and giving us that again, that snapshot of what it's going to take, and working with our tech department to see what's going to all entail is going to be a benefit to us as we kind of plan and move forward.
Make sure we can survive the draw on the infrastructure, right? The
That's
IT
correct.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I did want to say, because I feel it's necessary to share with you, we don't want to spend any money yet, so this is free, right? We just want to.
That's correct.
We're going to be
It's-
allowed to take the test and not pay for it.
That's correct.
But at some point, we will have to pay for it when it's the real McCoy.
Potentially.
Right, but right now, I spent 3 hours with one of the people in Columbus who does most of this legislation. And she said that, just put it this way, there would be a strong movement towards removing ourselves from park and probably opting into one of the other options, testing options, which she felt like some of the other options out there, they needed to investigate, but she was leaning towards, and I wrote some notes down, ACT Aspire. Are you familiar?
Yes.
And if that was brought up as an option, because it's written by, those tests are written by an organization in Iowa. ACT's always written these exams. It's not new. So they would have the same standard that they have had in place for years. And I think they're leaning towards that reliability factor versus park that's a better, bigger unknown, and even smarter balance. So the two consortiums so far that have been produced are park and smarter balance. And there's some discomfort with both of them. So she's thinking they're gonna lean towards ACT Aspire. And I'm just telling you that so that we don't spend any money on something that they may not use in a month. So there's kind of this hanging out, wait to see period that I think is always a good idea.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with being in a pilot. I don't think it hurts for the kids to see a test because often you're used as a learning tool.
Absolutely.
Disagree with that opportunity. So do you need a resolution then you present to the board?
No, it just, actually, we
FYI.
just need to give the confirmation and pretty much submit our AOK that we will participate as a district in this, in the field testing.
If the state is looking at moving away from park, is it still an aid to us to go through this? I mean, sometimes these pilots can be time-consuming and take time away and resources away from other things that we might want to do. I don't know if that's the case here, but if the state is still making up their mind what they want to do, I would hate to see us derail other things that we need to accomplish and pursue park. Can you comment about that?
Well, I think, with anything that is, brought forth and it does consume the instructional time is always a potential. But I think, in the essence of testing and assessments, I think there are some benefits to that exposure and understanding conceptually what needs to take place in that process, because my belief is that you're going to have opportunities to, while these questions, valid or invalid as they may be, I'd like to think that they're going to be such that it provides some sort of rigor and opportunities for us to see what kids and students will need to, move towards or move through, and teachers understanding what that looks like, regardless of what may come forward for us. So I understand your concern, but I don't think it's going to be that cumbersome in the sense of lost instructional time. I really don't.
Is it a whole
I think it's going to
day?
be a benefit. I'm
Is
sorry.
it a whole day?
Well, it's, there's two parts to it. There's a performance-based and there's also the actual end of the year, depending on the grade level. So it's instructionally, it kind of mirrors some of the things that students will be doing in the course of their instructional time. So, yes, it's not going to take a whole day. It'll take parts of different times. So it's not a lengthy.
It's not a one-time deal then? It's midterm and end of term?
Well, there's the performance-based, there's a series of components to that where the students will actually move through a process of learning something in its entirety. So it's not your typical paper, pencil, reading of a passage and then answering the question. It's more of, some steps along the way. So it's computer-based. Some of this is computer-based. So there'll be some that's computer and some that's not. So there'll be a combination of the two.
I'm still trying to understand. So is it multiple days of testing then?
It depends on how we set it up. It could be just a day, but oftentimes it's like an hour here and then maybe another hour the next day.
Is it all year long that you commit to when you get into this? It's
No.
just one kind of spot shot?
Yes. And it's more in the spring.
Well, it's more in the spring, because
Yes,
I'm
it's
thinking
spring.
that this legislation may happen pretty soon.
And it may.
So that park is not even something we're doing.
We just have to confirm participation by September 18th. Let's put our name in that.
Want me to get a timeline on what a proposal may look like?
I mean, I'm presuming there's no particular obligation here. I mean, if we ultimately decided it wasn't in our interest to do this, I think we send them a letter and say, thanks, but no thanks.
We can do that, we're not obligating ourselves.
I don't think so. I mean, I can,
If we're not giving them any money, what can they do?
and, I do think, the preparation for what potentially, and if something were to happen that they do pull, the purse strings on this, then I think it's not gonna, no harm to the situation of confirming this and allowing the opportunity. If it truly does come to fruition, then we do need to allow them that opportunity, or their teachers opportunities to see what they're up against.
It sounds like you think there may be benefit to doing it anyway, so.
I do.
I think often tests act as a learning tool. Because again, that's why we have our kids take many ACTs. They take one just so you get to know what the kind of questions they are and how long it takes you, and you can move through. So you're not sure that it hurts. And then when you see that subject matter through the rest of the semester, you go, oh yeah, I understand that. So I'm not sure that it's harmful to take it. But again, if we change out and the state goes to this ACT option, we can change out and maybe be a pilot for that one.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Next, we have 8.4, public participation on work session agenda items. So you need to make sure it's a work session agenda item, which would be either committee report could be, or school lunches, or park assessments.
Dr. Kleinsinger, I had a question, first of all. Were you saying for the school lunches that it was 800 calories over an entire week divided by 5? I just downloaded something from Federal Nutrition Services, USDA, that's listing calorie limits for the high school as 850 average calories per day. That's
Per day.
a hell of a big difference between that and 150.
Right. Well, there is. So, we.
And I mean, I don't have an objection either way. I would just say, I think we should be using the right numbers. And that
No
seems to
doubt.
be very
And just to be
different.
fair to Sarah, she didn't know I was going to ask that question, so we'll let her go back and get the data so we can confirm those.
Right, I mean, I don't think anybody should have.
It's 750 to 850 calories per week for a 5-day week. Less than 10 grams of, 10% can be saturated fat, and that's your biggest problem.
You said, they didn't hear you. You said 750 to 800 a week?
750 to 850 per week. That's the guidelines from this, on the federal government website.
I'm looking at a download from the USDA that says calorie maximums calculated as daily averages across the week. Daily averages, grades 9 through 12, 850 calories. Daily
But a
average.
daily average across the week, yeah. I wonder if that then includes the whole day, or is it just lunch?
It says
What you're
March.
looking at, is it just March?
Yeah, it says we'll get it, we'll get it.
Yeah, okay, that's
That
fine,
was
yeah,
my only issue.
we'll just look up the.
And I just wanted to say, I don't know that it's the change in what's offered as much for these kids. I mean, I've worked school lunch here in this district for years now. I'm there at least 3 times a month. I watch what those kids eat, don't eat, and throw away. And it is a ton of food, not just that they're throwing away their spinach salad. Actually, I see a lot of kids eating that spinach salad. It's their whole pack lunch that goes straight in the trash, pretty much. And I think it's much more a symptom of the privilege of the kids in this district, that they are, for the most part, not hungry kids. And they're offered a lot rather than the perhaps selection of whole wheat pizza that they're being given with less ketchup packets. I really do. These kids aren't kids that are coming to school hungry for the most part.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, discussion of other business as required. Any board member have other business as required? Okay, I have one thing, sorry, I'm gonna hold you up, Todd, I see you closing it up for the night. I went to this conference and, at Notre Dame. There was a conference and it was called, and here's the booklet, I'll send it around. The Changing Role of Education in America, Consequences of Common Core. And what it was a full day of professor from Stanford, 2 from Notre Dame, I'll share this with you, Hoover Institution, University of Arkansas, Hillsdale College, University of Toronto. So people from all over the country came. It was a very, very full conference. And they were talking about the standards in Common Core. And they felt that the standards were below, certainly below where we are as Springboro schools. And there was a lot of shock mentioned, and I'm just sharing with you what I learned, a lot of shock mentioned that Massachusetts hasn't so far come up with legislation, not that they're not working on it, but to opt themselves out because Massachusetts has standards that are already well exceed Common Core standards. There's certainly a number of these professors who feel that it is lowering the standards, Common Core is lowering the standards, and we have to be very wary of the math, the schedule at which math is put in and how it actually slows the progression of math so that less students will get into calculus. And calculus is one of the requirements for a lot of the colleges. So anyway, it's of concern, and I think that there'll be a video of it. It was like 6-7 hours, and I can share that with you as soon as I get it. So each speaker that spoke on the specific subject, either English language or math. And a lot of states, I think there are 12, who have developed legislation opting out of Common Core right now. So they're very processes of getting out of it. So I think they're seeing that there's some error. And I have never really worried as much about the standards and the way they're written, although they presented some pretty hefty evidence that they're actually missing, developmental pieces are missing, so that they introduce things that are developmentally not appropriate for the children. And these come from one of the PhDs in psychology, child development, and they're all saying that the rate of introduction of topics wasn't age appropriate in the lower levels, and then in the upper levels, it was less than age appropriate. So there's kind of a cattywampus. And teachers who mentioned that they were kind of frustrated that the standards keep getting changed, and so they never know what to teach. It's always this paradigm shift. We're going to do this reform, and so I have a little difficulty keeping up with it. I did ask the state school board about Springboro and whether Springboro could opt out itself. And every school can opt out of Common Core and PARCC assessments. You can individually opt out. It's suggested by others that we shouldn't because we can't pass the test. And I said, does that mean that then the test is going to be harder than what we already teach? And they said, well, no, Springboro already exceeds these standards. Springboro will do fine. I said, then why are you telling us we can't opt out? If we want to use any other standards, like Massachusetts standards, they said, absolutely you can use Massachusetts standards as a school district. You do not have to follow through on all this stuff. I said, but all the literature, all the textbooks say Common Core aligned. Isn't it then just Common Core materials. And they said, no, everybody is putting that, they're just stamping it on all their books. It could be the same exact book you've always used, but they're doing that to sell a product. So they think that stamping Common Core will make it more sellable. Not that it's any different than you've ever taught from. So I just want to be very wary as a district that we make sure that we keep challenging our students, that we don't slow it down because it meets Common Core standards, that we keep it at the pace it is or ratchet it up. I don't think we should slow any part of what we do down. In other words, I think we're doing better than the Common Core standards. And I've been being told by Ohio School Board people, our legislators, and now people from across the country, the Common Core is a lower set of standards than what we've probably been doing here at Springboro. It is really meant for the schools who do poorly academically to try to bring them up. It's not meant for schools who already do well, bring them down, so let's not get caught in that hook if we can afford it. Does that make sense? Okay. I will be asking the board to approve the travel expenses, which was $25 the whole day, and that was for lunch. So it was pretty much a free event. We just paid $25 for lunch, but I do have some mileage and had to get a hotel. So I'm going to submit that soon. Any questions about that? All right. Guess we're done. I don't think we need.
There was one item that we approved tonight that was on personnel board that Mrs. Jarvis would like to address.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. All right. I would have voted no. Sorry.
I didn't know it was on there either.
I have accepted a position at Xenia Schools, so I will be leaving the district at the end of this month. I've enjoyed my time here. It's been a lot of fun. It's been very interesting. So I want to thank you guys.
Yeah, they want you to perform the magic.
All right.
If you're here.
I have to go find money
See
there.
what happens when we get them trained.
No, I want to bring that up because I think we all owe you a debt of gratitude because you came in and made some changes. And I think people recognize that, and so you're in demand, what can we say?
Thank you.
But thank you for all that you've contributed to our schools.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
It's frustrating. As I told her today and yesterday, no.
I know.
No.
It's like, what if I say no?
No. I'm going to say, no, you can't go.
Say no.
Give them a call and say, no, please don't.
So,
Well, that's sad, but I understand.
thank you. So, it's an exciting new chapter.
So we got to put the word out.
We do. I've started doing that for you.
Good.
So,
Okay, any other last comments? We are not going to hold executive session tonight. We don't have a reason to do that, so we will, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.